Good evening and welcome to those joining us from the US and to those joining us from China. Good morning. My name is Ginger Sigmund, the Managing Director of ND Energy. Welcome to Energy Week Plus 2022 and our webinar, Architecture and Climate Change, Grand Visions in Urban Planning. This event is being recorded and will be posted on ND Energy's website for future viewing. Please visit energy.nd.edu to find it. We would now like to recognize our partners at Notre Dame International and Notre Dame's Beijing Global Gateway as co-sponsors for this event. Here with me is Zhengyu Wang, the Executive Director of Notre Dame's Beijing Gateway. She will now welcome our audience in China.
大家好 ，ND Energy 我们的合作伙伴让我用英文欢迎来自中国的听众。非常感谢各位在北京的清晨来到了这里。本次讲座期间，您可以获得英文字幕。请您点击屏幕右下方工具栏里的 Live Transcript， 可以选择到英文字幕。如果您的 Zoom 更新到了 5.11 版本，您还可以选择 Closed Caption。AI 将自动将英文翻译成中文，并在屏幕上呈现出您选择的中文字幕。活动结束后，我们 ND Energy 和 NDI 也将此活动的视频永久上传在我们的网站上，欢迎您回顾。Thanks, Ginger.
Thank you, Zhengyu. Tonight's moderator is Professor John Onyango, Associate Professor in the School of Architecture at the University of Notre Dame. He will lead this virtual conversation between our two speakers. Thank you for joining us, John.
Good morning for those in China and good evening for those who are here in the US. I thank you very much for being here, joining us in this webinar. I thank ND Energy and the partners who've joined us here as well. Our two speakers today is going to be Do Zhang and Krupali Kushe. Now, Do Zhang is the director of Sasaki Shanghai office and the initiator of Shanghai Landscape Forum and USGBC Leadership Award winner. She has led many award-winning projects in the past 22 years. Her dual background in both landscape architecture and architecture, along with experience on master planning, enable her to carry out grand visions as well as finite details from landscape to a more integrated environment. Her recent practice is focused on public parks, urban landscapes. Mrs. Zhang has served as a jury member of many national and international competitions. She has also taught graduate design studio at Tongji University since 2018. Welcome. Joe.
Hi, thank you.
I'll introduce Krupali. Krupali Uplekar Kushe is an associate professor of architecture at the University of Notre Dame. She directs DAMA, the Digital Historic Architecture and Material Analysis, and VARCA, DVARCA, Development and Advancement of Resilient Cities Alliance research teams. The VARCA brings together scientists that are examining incremental changes in sea level rise with practitioners who are planning and building transformative cities that can act as net zero, net positive, and green contributors in reduction of carbon emissions and heat island effects on the climate. These studies are used to create comprehensive urban planning solutions on a regional scale for the site through faculty expertise at the University of Notre Dame. Welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. So we're going to have Do present and then she's going to share a screen, And then we're going to have Krupali come in and share. And then from there, we're going to have a conversation on some of the questions that arise out of this conversation. So Joe, you're welcome to share your screen.
Good morning and good evening. It's my great pleasure to join the ND Energy Week this year and talk about sustainable landscape. There are a lot of definitions about what's sustainable landscape. What I prefer is ASLA's version. It says sustainable landscape is responsible to the environment, regenerative, and actively contributing to the development of healthy communities. I look at sustainable landscape as a systematic thinking that integrating environmental, social, and economic aspects to empower the sites. Its environmental side is mainly focused on the responsibility to conserve natural resources and protect a global ecosystem to support health and well-being. While the social aspect is more focused on creating spaces to provide equal opportunities for all groups, unfold the site identity, and interpret the site memory into the life today. The economic aspect is mainly focused on saving construction costs and catalyze economic growth around the site and in the region. All three perspectives are interrelated and reciprocal to each other. In landscape practice today, Sustainable Sites Initiative, managed by Green Business Certification Incorporation, is often used to rate the sustainable land design, construction, operation, and maintenance strategies and solutions. It can also be used to be as a concise framework for identifying and implementing sustainable landscape. It's more focused on the environmental sustainability though, with some coverage on social perspective and limited coverage on economics. The current version includes 10 sections covering the site context, pre-design assessment and planning, design, construction, operations and maintenance, education and performance monitoring, innovation and exemplary performance, with a total of 200 points and 4 certification levels. Over 100 projects have been certified so far globally, and 5 of them are in China. Among those 5 projects, both Xuhui Runway Park and Guangzhou Biotan Exhibition Center are designed by our teams. Besides sites, many organizations have also developed carbon calculation tools. Carbon Conscious was developed by Sasaki earlier this year. It's used to calculate both the carbon emission and the carbon sequestration for a project. Next, I'm gonna use Xuhui Runway Park as an example to explain what's involved in designing a sustainable landscape and how it gets site certification. The site is in Xuhui district of Shanghai. It used to be the main runway of Longhua Airport for over 70 years. The airport was originally built in 1922 as a military strip, then converted to a civil airport 7 years later. In 1946, when China joined the International Civil Aviation Organization, Longhua Airport was designed as China's primary international airport. It was also the largest international airport in Eastern Asia back then. The runway we saw today was built in 1948, when the area was still at the perimeter of the city and surrounded by extensive farmland. As the city grew, the area around the airport had been gradually developed, and Shanghai has moved its civil aviation base to Hongqiao since 1960s. Although Longhua Airport remained in operation as a general airport until the early 21st century. In Shanghai's master plan for 2035, Xuhui Riverfront, where the airport was located, was envisioned as one of the future poles of growth and will be transformed into a mixed-use district of residential, commercial, office, and cultural destinations. The historic runway was to be converted to a 50-meter wide park and a 34-meter wide street. Both are going to be surrounded by high-density residential, commercial, and office uses. A new subway will be running underneath the historic runway. As an urban redevelopment, the site itself meets the prerequisites and can get many credits in the site context section of sites. It was a developed brownfield site within existing developed areas and will be well connected with multimodal transit networks. Our design concept, Runway of Modern Life, was inspired by the site's unique history and integrates with nearby communities' daily needs. The design mimics the motion of a runway, creating diverse linear spaces for vehicles, bicycles, and pedestrians, and organizing the park and the street into an interconnected sequence at a runway scale, a runway of modern life. Although all spaces are linear in form, we had used different skills, topography, programs, and materials to create diverse spatial experience. Ascending and descending movements were applied in the park to replicate the experience of being on an airplane, connecting visitors to sites past and providing a collection of distinctive views. The layout of the street also contributes to the urban scale of the district by limiting the number of vehicular travel lanes and promoting public transit over personal cars. Designated bike lanes are integrated into the street section, facilitating the last 1 kilometer transit connection between the transit and various destinations. 6 rows of deciduous trees were planted along the street to create a comfortable microclimate, seasonal color, and a pedestrian-scaled boulevard. A sunken garden was carved between the park and adjacent development to connect the subway station with various development parcels, improving the walking experience to and from the transit, as well as enriching the spatial composition of the park. Additional commercial frontage along the garden perimeter activates the garden space while generating some income to support park's daily operation and maintenance cost. The project was designed and built before it registered for sites. We simply followed good practice for a sustainable landscape through the entire design and construction process. The design was focused on connection and uses, site memory, stormwater management, native plants, and habitats. And those were closely related to the social, environmental, and economic perspectives of sustainable landscape. We had planned diverse programs in the park, accessible to all and primarily free of charge. Active lifestyles are nurtured in multiple forms of runways. Informal soccer games can be held in multi-purpose lawn. The cultural events and performances are accommodated in the sunken garden, while the smaller social gatherings can take place in various restaurants and public service facilities scattered throughout the park. Private conversations and reflection can take place in multiple gardens, the riverfront, and bird-watching grove, offering a respite from the busy urban life. The entire park is universally accessible, providing equal opportunities for all groups of people. The park has served as a year-round destination for nearby residents, office workers, families, and students today. All of these meets the requirement of human health and well-being section insights and received many credits. The park is accessible, promoting equitable use, supporting mental restoration, physical activity, and social connection. When we're tracing the site memory from its airport life, we had carefully investigated the site and identified a row of original runway concrete panels, which remained integral and structurally sound. These panels were preserved as the main path of the park to prolong the site's memory. The smaller concrete sections from the demolished runway were also reused at the resting areas around the main path. Trident maple was planted as the iconic tree species, delineating the preserved runway panels due to its similar leaf form to the Trident airplane. The preservation and reuse of the runway concrete on site has not only saved the construction cost, but also reduced the greenhouse gas emissions from manufacturing of the new concrete. The site furnishing were designed to evoke an aviation-inspired identity, with benches and light posts recalling the form of airplane wings. Most construction materials were sourced locally to reduce emissions from transportation and support the local economy. For example, fused bamboo lumber was used as a sustainable substitute of tropical hardwood on benches, boardwalks, and riverfront overlooks due to its fast-growing nature, comparable strengths, and longevity in outdoor environment. The material selections we made entitled us the credits on maintaining existing pavement, using salvaged materials and original materials. The stormwater from both the park and the street is managed through the rain gardens and constructed wetland. The rain gardens can collect and filter up to 95th percentile of the annual storm events. The treated stormwater meets quality requirement for recreational water suitable for human touch in local codes. Portions of the treated stormwater is diverted to an underground system and prepared for park's operational use, including the full water supply for the interactive runway fountain. The rainwater along the canal was filtered through the forebay and the constructed wetland along. It not only settles the sediments and filters the pollutions in the runoff, but also provides a stable supply for the canal. All the effort in the stormwater management also gets us multiple credits related to manage precipitation, reduce water use and irrigation, and design functional stormwater amenities. All the stormwater treatment measures offer not only nice scenery, but also valuable wildlife habitat. In the rain gardens, you'll find iris and purple loosestrife in the spring, hosta and silvergrass in the summer, and the chrysanthemum in the fall. It has become a place enjoyed by people and diverse wildlife species all year round. The canal from the canal front, the forebay and wetland provide great habitats for waterfalls and attracted many people to come and enjoy. All plants in the park are native to Yangtze River Delta. 68% of park's hardscape is shaded, providing a comfortable microclimate. These also contributed to the soil and vegetation credits insights. We used all native plants and restored native plant communities, optimized the biomass and reduced urban heat island effects. Among the total 112 points the project received, site context, pre-design assessment and planning, design and innovation contributed 91 points. At the end, the project received the first Site Gold certification in mainland China and many national and international design awards. Following the project's construction, many major residential, commercial, and office developments were implemented on adjacent parcels. And the property value of the adjoining neighborhood has increased over 80% since 2015. The project turned out to be a real success. So now when we look at sustainable landscape, we see it as a healthy coexistence of the biosphere and civilization. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zhang, for presenting this wonderful project, and I look forward to discussion after Krupali has presented. Krupali, you're next in a presentation.
Hi, my name is Krupali Boucher, faculty at the School of Architecture, University of Notre Dame, and I'm glad to present at the Architecture and Climate Change discussion happening this evening. I'm thankful to ND Energy for hosting it. The topic I'm going to present today is the impact of sea level rise and flooding on the eastern waterfront of Mumbai. This presentation will have two specific questions that I will try and answer. First, how is sea level rise going to affect the city of Mumbai? How accurate is this projection? And second, how can new development of Mumbai be built in a resilient way? The impact of climate change is real and is going to make millions of people around the globe living in coastal cities homeless. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, AR6 report from United Nations, spelled out how urbanization has pushed up intense rainfall in cities across South Asia, using several scientific pieces of evidence generated on Indian cities. The report builds on an analysis by NASA predicting that several Asian cities located either on or near the coastline would have to withstand significant sea level rise by 2100. The Climate Central tool shown here, for example, shows that even with the foot rise of a level in sea level, the cumulative effect of land and land subsidence, land indentation, will bring half the city of Mumbai underwater. The report that came out of NASA's research on the topic showed that there is large impact due to sea level rise prediction for the area. The government of India has measured tidal wave information and seen dramatic increase in water levels in just a time span of 7 years. It is predicted that the city would end up having a meter rise by 2100. This created a major concern for people involved in the studies, and a deeper dive into the understanding of impact of sea level rise and climate change on the city of Mumbai was needed. The city also faces issues due to drinking water scarcity. The city has an estimated 55% of people that live under poverty conditions and have very poor housing available. With depleting resources, including groundwater, which is slowly drying up and is being utilized at very high rate, the impact of sea level rise is not just from the fact that it is around and surrounding the land, but it is also slowly entering into the water tables of the city, creating issues of contamination of water. Surrounded on three sides by water and having a population of around 25 million people, with around 9 million people living on the planned site that is the area of study for this research, the site became extremely critical to be examined in this time. The research question posed was, how do we predict which of the data sets we see here are correct? And should And what would be the impact of sea level rise on the city of Mumbai? And how important it is to understand the source of data that is being used and the accuracy of this level of study. The NASA sea level rise team seem to have the most resourceful data sets. These are much more precise in context of United States, but also fairly strong in case of Mumbai. These are being used to examine the sea level rise projection for the site. Beyond these, there was a need for information related to the surface DEM, or digital elevation models, and land subsidence for the city. The University of Colorado's Research Center, CIRUS, is looking at land indentation and land subsidence data for the city of Mumbai. We are cross-referencing these data sets with the tidal data for the Government of India and land data we are collecting from Xylem Water Solutions. All this information is put together and allows for a collective examination of impact of sea level rise and heavy rainfall on the city of Mumbai. This, along with various teams that we have at Notre Dame, including computer science, engineering, hydrology, and of course, the School of Architecture, have created a consortium to tackle the problem of understanding the cumulative impact on the site. This ongoing study will be available in a visual way for various researchers to use for purposes in the future on a Python platform that will hope to integrate on the NASA website and to give the government authorities proper predictability and resourceful use for the data for planning purposes. So what would be the right solution for the case of the city of Mumbai? The right solution would have to be able to create a way in which there's balance between the biosphere that surrounds the site, which would allow for natural environment and built environment to coexist in a positive way. A good urban plan would normally be able to balance both in a manner that allows the coexistence of natural ecosystems along with built ecosystems in a way that we survive today. The eastern waterfront of Mumbai city is a $1 trillion development property, which is mainly under the possession of Mumbai Port authorities, a large holding for the Indian Navy and other government activities. This area is predominantly used as a port and has been open for new development in recent months. As the city is growing, this land will play a vital role in the future development of the city. The solution we proposed that you can see here took many, many months of work to come together. And this is the first conceptual thought process put together by the class of 2022. The solution for the design was to take into consideration the fact that there are low-lying areas that had to have green natural parkland in relation to the new development. Our research showed that the site is highly susceptible to low-lying floodplains. The whole area would have to have a lagoon that would protect the site from large tidal impact and also act as a natural barrier between the sweetwater and saltwater zones. The tidal lagoon would protect the outer edge of the city, similar to the lagoon concept that is being proposed in Wales recently, and have a way to reduce large tidal impact on the site, creating new green space that is full of natural lowland greens common to this area's ecosystem, allowing for various natural species to mutually coexist. You can see, for example, there are sections here throughout the site that we are proposing, which will have the biggest impact on creating the kind of biodiversity we want to bring to the site, which with around 52% of the development that is going to be green in comparison to the new development of the area, bringing that coexistence between nature and built environment in a balanced manner. The built part of the development is to be raised level on top that would allow for urban development to be built with green infrastructure solutions. This proposal also talks about elevating the ground level in a manner that would allow parking and storage on the levels underneath, thus allowing the built-up area to become a place where people are having easy access to the site, but at the same time allowing people to have ways in which they're integrating the experience with natural resources without feeling that they are disconnected from the ground. You will see that in this proposal, the built area would be connected with means of water harvesting throughout the site and with underground water storage and cleaning systems, such as natural reed bed water purification plants for clean water provisions. And the environmental impact also is very positive because we are finding ways in which the monsoon water that comes at very high speed in the city of Mumbai is largely utilized at the same time to recharge the water tables and recharge the natural water resources in the area, thus reducing the amount of seawater flow and thus reducing the amount of not just contamination, but also reduction of sea level rise that would be coming from the impact of the water flow. In conclusion, the research notes that we cannot completely change the sea level rise concern itself, but that the way the city would be planned, it would allow for better movement, higher circulation, greater connectivity, and a greater sense of character, time, and sense of place, while creating an environmentally conscious site. This is the team that is working on this project. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Krupali and Diozang. This is fantastic, really. This is really interesting approaches to two different projects, two big cities that we have out there. I have learned a lot from both. I mean, I'd seen some of the Mumbai project, but in small elements. I had not seen the one in Shanghai, and I thought it's really, really fantastic indeed. Really fantastic project. Now, question, before I start the question, I just want to acknowledge we have William Bates with us somewhere in the audience. He is the president of AIA. So just acknowledging his presence, and Notre Dame alumni as well. As we start, I'm going to start with Duo Zhang. In your design for this particular project here, it looks like you're focused on urban heat, probably. And I just wanted you to talk about this a little bit more. I mean, what are the key elements you use to address urban heat?
Oh, this is a park project. I mean, it's focused on the public realm. Okay. Our scope covers both the park and the street. So in such context, one of the major measures we used to sort of reduce the urban heat island effect is to provide more shade to the paved areas. As I mentioned before in the presentation, over 68% of the hardscape is covered by deciduous trees. I particularly mentioned deciduous trees because in landscape design, we're quite focused on that. Although the evergreen trees can also provide shade to the paved areas, but in the winter, in Shanghai's climate, people also love to have sunshine. So deciduous trees is always a good choice for us to allow for the balance between the two.
Absolutely, thank you very much. Krupali, what about you in your case? How did you guys address urban heat island? I know Mumbai is very hot and humid. I haven't been there yet. I'm on my way there one of these days.
Yeah, so heat island effect is huge in Mumbai, especially because we have a lot more of built up area, and the built up area in percentage to that, the green areas are much lower. I did not have a slide to show the percentage of green in relation to the city of Mumbai, but you can imagine 25 million people on such a small square footage, it means you have a loss of green in a dramatic way. And so one of the reasons for creating 52% landscape, so there's like equal amount of built and green spaces, is to reduce the impact of the heat island effect. That's one. The other one is the percolation of water within the frame of the soil. That also absorbs and using materials that are sustainable, long-term sustainable materials that are not directly influencing rebringing concrete. So having ways in which they recharge the water tables, but at the same time also help in reduction of temperatures, because studies have been seen, if you use concrete, the impact of heat island effect is so much more than when you use materials that are porous and allow for a lot more water to be part of the integrated method of protecting the environment.
Thank you very much. The next question, I want to start with Krupali, then come back to Jozang, which relates to sea level rise, which is a Mumbai problem, and it's a worldwide problem. And in Mumbai, there's this, as it's presented to us, 1 meter sea level rise by 2051, which is quite scary. How do you see your design addressing those issues of water? You've mentioned one is reduction of concrete to allow for percolation of water. Also the issue of just extreme event. What happens after extreme event? What do you do with the water?
Right. So both these concerns are pretty important for us. One, the fact that with the increase in sea level rise, literally like around 40% of the land is going to be underwater. That is an issue. Part of the discussion early on was relocation, but relocation does not happen in scales like where you have millions of people living there already. As you can see in the case of Miami, people are not willing to leave. So there have to be other ways in which solutions have to be created around that site. And so the way to work with it was to find ways to change the grade or change the level at which the buildings are constructed, but not having them on open stilts like we are doing right now, but instead use that area for parking. And at the same time, find ways in which, like in Venice, you're using water to act as a storage method that can also act as a barrier against the seawater from coming in. So both those methods together was allowing us to fight against the sea level concern. Now, the incidence of very fast rain or very flood condition situations that can happen, the solution, again, I did not get time to explain that in the presentation, but there is ways in which we are channeling the water to be acting as a barrier on one side of the tidal barrier. On the other side, there are ways in which, just like in Chicago, when you have heavy rains coming in, you can let the water out to a certain degree. So both these options are available to allow enough water to be there and to be protected and to be utilized throughout the year. But at the same time, if there is an emergence of water level beyond what is the capacity of the site, that there are ways to channel it outside from the site.
From the site. For the audience, if you have any questions, there's a function called Q&A. You can go ahead and type in your questions as we keep having this conversation, and we'll try and answer them as we go forward. Jozang, Shanghai your development is very close to water. I think there's a river side, and there's of course a former airport. How did you address this issue of possibility of extreme events after the flood, if there's a lot of rain, typhoon, and how you address that in your design?
Yeah, similar to Mumbai, Shanghai is a city with a big population, about 25 million people living in the municipality of Shanghai. Shanghai is also as you mentioned, a sort of a place near the ocean. Due to its sort of a natural formation of the Shanghai area, which we call Yangtze River Delta. Naturally, there are a lot of streams, rivers running through the city. So even today in the city, we see a lot of canals, which work as sort of the stormwater reception vehicle to hold all the storm water when the big event comes. However, when the huge event comes, in the current system, it still has to it has still to rely on the flood protection system along the big rivers, such as the flood wall, etc. However, within the city, we have started to implement various what's called sponge city measures to help sort of reduce the impact from the big storms. For example, in the project I just presented, we have implemented a series of street side rainwater garden system along the entire street for about 1.6 kilometers long. So all the runoff from both the street and the park will go into the rain garden first, get filtered, and recharge the groundwater, settled there before it's further discharged to the surface water system. Yeah, so that has been one of the major measures we have been using. And also in China, I think one of the common practice is that in the green spaces or the parks, you cannot have more than 30% of the hard surface, meaning the majority of the site is green. So that also works as a sponge to absorb all the water as much as they can.
Well, that's fantastic. That's very, very good solutions that you guys are proposing and have actually used in Shanghai and proposed in Mumbai. What I see here is trying to use what you have, there's natural material, using nature to try and mitigate as opposed to the use of human intervention, but trying to rely on nature to address this particular climate change impact. Now, I had a question on the decision that you had on using sites. And I know you mentioned that you designed it sustainably without thinking of sites. Sites came later on. And that's a testament to your team and Sasaki's approach to a very thorough way of looking at sustainable development. Why did you choose to go for sites as opposed to LEED, for example? I know they're very closely related. And what are the differences?
Yeah, I can take this opportunity to advocate sites.
Yes.
Sites is a new system. It's managed by GBCI, the same organization approving LEED certification, right? It's mainly focused on site. So let's say you can see it as a LEED for landscape. So or landscape version of the LEED. You can see it this way. It's a rating system basically to evaluate how sustainable a landscape is. So it's more targeted on the landscape versus LEED is mostly targeted on buildings or developments. Yeah, so that's why we applied for sites instead.
Okay. There's a question from the audience here. This is from Sam Zhang, who says, I wonder what is the reasoning behind making two big park zone and residential zone in Mumbai project versus a collection of smaller patches of parks? How is the location of the park building determined?
Thank you, Sam. Hi, by the way. It's great to hear this question because we initially started with some smaller parks to look at the idea of connecting them in a manner that is more like a chain. But when we started looking at it, one of the things that came forward to us was the building of an ecosystem that is diverse enough to contain various forms of natural wildlife, and that there is a cyclic nature of that wildlife that can continue forward beyond what can be seen in small parks. What happens typically in places like Mumbai is small parks get overrun very quickly with the human population, and then the ecosystem balance is lost. With a larger park like this, what it allows is a much more balanced way in which the ecosystem and the native plants plus native wildlife can survive in a better way. And that was one of the reasons for creating this. Also, it is not completely connected to the public side. It is more connected to the seaside, and that was also intentional to allow both the species that are in water or close to water and those species that are on land to be able to cohabit in a peaceful way.
Thank you very much. Let me see. There's another question here. Let's see. Okay, there's nobody asking that question. Nothing's coming in there. Now I want to go back to you, Duozhan. You did mention Sasaki has developed a way of measuring carbon counting, and I really want to hear more about that because it's something that many people haven't done. If you don't mind explaining that to us, because it's a really fantastic way of measuring impact of in development on the environment.
Yeah, it's a new sort of application we have developed, and it's called Carbon Conscious. It's just published online. I think you can access that through Sasaki's website from earlier this year. It's a tool, basically, you can use to calculate the carbon emission and carbon sequestration. When you have a project, you go to that tool, you can measure, for example, you can measure your building or the landscape and assign different materials based on your design. And it has a database to tell you, for example, how much carbon sequestration a square meter of forest can make, things like that. The database is embedded into the app. So basically you go in the program, you measure your area, you assign the material, or come up with some numbers of either the carbon emission or the sequestration. And then eventually you will see whether you have positive numbers or negative numbers. Positive numbers meaning you have generated more emission than what's being absorbed on site. If you have 0 or negative numbers, that's great. So it's a way to assist the design process, and you can use that many times during the process and adjust your design accordingly. So that's how it works.
Okay. Thank you very much. I was just wondering can the audience be able to access the link to the tool? Is it open or is it just for use internally?
It's open to everybody. You can access that from our website.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much. That is very nice to know that. Next question that I'm going to ask here probably relates to Krupali's case and also your case. Do you have any projects in the US that you're looking at that addresses these particular concerns and issues?
So maybe not directly sea level rise, because sea level rise, the impact is coming from glacial waters and other sources that are causing the concern. But we do have projects presently working on the area actually close to Notre Dame. It is the South Bend, Mishawaka, Elkhart chain of Midwestern cities that are having the concern that they're actually climate positive right now. They're seen as this positive impact. They have great water resource, nice rainfall, everything is well and good, working well. But what kind of concerns may come up in the future? And how can we make these cities more apt and learn from the mistakes that have happened in other other US cities and channel that to improve the conditions around here? So one of the projects that we're working on is actually called the Western Reserve, which is a protection belt, an environmentally protected green belt that we are trying to develop that's on the outskirts, very close to the airport area. And it's clearly connected to the chain lakes associated to the city of South Bend. And it's a series of natural little clustered development that can have housing and economic values created to touristic activities, but it's a natural reserve. And it would allow as a way in which the cities do not lose their green ratios that they would have, the natural habitat that exists around this area does not get lost, but instead actually gets supported in a larger way. So the ratio of built land and green land can be improved in the Midwestern belt.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Jojang? Any projects out here? I know Sasaki is big. You're working all over the place.
Our headquarters is in US, so we had a lot of projects related to sustainability going on in US at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
What I can think of at the moment is a project under construction called Bonnet Park. Bonnet Spring in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
It's not my work. It's
Yes.
done by my colleagues. That project actually tried to reorganize an existing wetland area along the Bonnet Spring, and one try to clean up invasive species, get the wetland plants and wetland forests there to grow more healthier, and at the same time introduce that place as a recreational and educational opportunity for the communities around. So people living in the area can have the opportunity to boat, because the area is pretty big, to boat in the area, enjoy the wetland, or simply walking through the forest area. We have also proposed quite a few educational buildings for both school children to go there, get lessons, or just for the community to gather and enjoy the nice environment surrounded by the forest and the wetland. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
So that's under construction.
Yeah. We have a question coming in, I think, from China. I'm assuming it is from China because somebody's anonymous. The question is, there are various Chinese sponge cities, such as Ningbo and Hangzhou, that were accepted in 2014 and are currently being developed to fight the effects of global warming and flooding in the recent years. The question then is this project part of the same initiative, or is it a precursor sister project used to determine the viability of the sponge cities?
Related, I think that's a very good question. Related to that, I can actually tell a story which I didn't have chance to talk about during the presentation. I think for us, sustainability is something we always embed in our practice, no matter if there's a certification system or there's a policy or not. We're landscape architects, trying to promote the environmental value is kind of part of our job, our daily job. So we have been doing all of this. I have been doing all of this since I started working in Sasaki. So it's not because a policy come up or a big flood event come up and we did all of this. It's just part of our daily practice. That's why I said good practice deserve credits. We designed the Xuhui Runway Park not only before we were aware of the publication of the site system, but also before the sponge city policy went out. An interesting thing I remember during the design process is that we have proposed our design, during the schematic design phase. We have presented our design to the client and the government officials, and the design was well received. But at the end, we got a notice that the design is conditionally approved. What's the condition? It's a rain garden. They were not confident the rain garden is a good measure to apply at this project. They were concerned about the management issue. They were concerned about technical issue, etc. So the rain garden was actually put on hold when the rest of the park was proceeding in the design process. Then a few months later, the smart city policy went out, and we finally got the green light on the rain garden. So it got, finally implemented in the project. So it's not really triggered by any, in this particular case, it's not triggered by any disaster or anything else, or just to meet certain requirement or pursue certain certification. It's just part of good practice. So that's why I emphasize good practice is always a good thing to follow, no matter when.
No matter when. Thank you very much. That's a fantastic motto. I'm going to put that on my logo. Good practice deserves credit. It's really quite good. I hope I can borrow that. Yeah. Now the next question I would say relates to, you did mention in the presentation that you're doing phase 1 of the project. How many phases do you have? How many more to come? Are you measuring the impact as you go along, or you just continue and see what happens as you develop?
Whom is the question directed to, John?
Okay, it's directed to Dozan, but also you could also talk about your side in Mumbai as well, because I think it applies to both. You've done some work in Mumbai and this follow-up, I'm assuming, and in your case, your presentation said phase 1, so I'm assuming there's phase 2 and phase 3 coming up.
Right. I can briefly answer that. The project is completed now. Phase 1 pursued a site certification. Yeah, that's why we mentioned the phase 1, because there are 3 phases in total.
Yeah.
And phase 1 got implemented first. After we finished the construction,
Okay.
I noticed the site system is out. We know it's being discussed, within the landscape community. They were soliciting comments and feedbacks when they had a draft out. And then it took them quite a few years to develop the final version. So I think after the construction was finished, I learned that it's out and people can apply for that. So then I looked into all the final version, the final content of the requirements, and felt that our runway park project can meet all the requirements. We're qualified. So then we start to lobby the client to apply for the certification. And it took us about 6 months from the registration to the final certification, because everything was done. So that happened with phase 1. And during that time, phase 2 and phase 3 were put into construction. And now the entire project is finished.
Okay, Krupali?
Well, basically, this project has 4 phases in it. The first one, as I was informing, is about just understanding the quality of information that's coming out of these data sets that people are getting. Everybody's nervous about sea level rise, but how predictable are they? How much certainty can you have for something that's more than 70 years from now? And how can we plan or design according to longevity, but at the same time also what would be immediate impact for people, or the tax money that is going into making these projects happen? So that's phase 1. Phase 2 is the conceptual design process. Both these phases, by the way, are happening simultaneously. Phase 1 and phase 2 are informing each other in some ways, and they are helpful in understanding what is necessary to be done. The reason why the data is such an important aspect is many times as planners, we go in with an understanding and a trust that all the scientists are telling us is absolutely valid and it's how we should project and work. But in reality, we can start seeing that based on the terrain of the site, based on site conditions, there are so many things that can be different. And so understanding the relation of the two is kind of critical. Phase 3 and 4 are actual implementation. And then the phase 3 actually informs phase 4, which is identifying the life cycle of the project and understanding, did we truly achieve the goals we had started with? Are we actually getting the goal of not just sea level rise, but reducing the kind of emission and reducing the amount of heat island effect that we are getting on the site. That in turn helps reduce the climate impact. So that kind of life cycle analysis and then getting an understanding of this project makes sense and the lessons learned from it to go to the next site is kind of an important aspect for us. The phase 3 would be the one that takes the most amount of time. It's a very large scale project and a very large site. And so it is itself divided into multiple parts depending on incremental development that needs to happen. So we're looking at something from now for the next 10 years.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much. I think there are 2 other questions, but I think you've answered them. I saw Joe just answered those. So
yeah.
coming in now to finalize.
Yeah, I don't know if everybody saw that. There were 2 questions. One was about the runway park. It's the question says it's open to the from the photos. It looks like it's open to the public 24/7. Whether this is real and how was that achieved? Yes, it is open to the public 24/7. It was designed that way. It was designed as a public green space that everybody can access it at any time. It's just our intention, it needs to be, it's part of the public realm. It needs to be used and accessed by the public all the time. It's not, it says, how was that achieved? I think the question was concerned about the management, etc. It was closely managed by the client and the district government. There have been people sort of patrolling around from time to time. And so far, I haven't heard of any issues yet. And a lot of old parks in China were gated. But in Shanghai, we saw more and more of those gated parks have becoming open to the public 24/7 these days. I think that's a trend. I think in the future, all big parks are supposed to be open to the public 24/7. So that was one. And what's the other question? I forgot.
The other question was life cycle assessment, which you mentioned, talked about, and life cycle costing.
Yeah, that's a very good question. The landscape performance is something we want to watch very closely. We have been doing that in a couple of our China projects so far. We have been collaborating with local scholars at universities, of course, and their students to measure the performance of the landscape. We have done that for another park in Shanghai, Jiading Central Park, many years ago. And this year, the current year, 2022, we had also collaborated with a scholar and his student in Tongji University, monitoring the performance of Xuhui Runway Park. They have been doing that on both social side and environmental side. I think they're also trying to pull some data out of the economic side as well. They haven't finished it yet. I've seen the progress report, which was a questionnaire mainly on the social side about people's impression, people's uses of the park. Seems like to most of the questions, it has been quite positive. And their data on the environmental side performance is not out yet. So I'm waiting to see how it works. The scholar was very interested in the project and really want to conduct a year-long monitoring for the park. At the same time, it's a joint effort between Tongji University and us, working with Landscape Architecture Foundation case study program. We applied for the LAFCSI and they got funding for the work they've been doing. And I think that part was to suit that CSI requirement part. That part is done, but they'll continue to do the monitoring until the end of this year.
Thank you. Thank you very much for both of you for participating. I'll let Ginger finalize. Ginger?
All right. On behalf of Indie Energy and Notre Dame's Beijing Global Gateway, I want to thank John for leading this discussion and Joe and Kripali for this enlightening conversation. And thanks to our audience for joining us tonight. We hope you have a good evening. And to our attendees in China, we hope you have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.